Hey, Tommy, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Good.
Great. So today we're going to talk about, I don't know. Are we going to talk about this topic?
Yeah, this is a little scary to dive into. It's probably out of the topics that we've talked about in terms of podcasts, it's maybe one of the most contentious topics that we've talked about, difficult ones to struggle and get our hands around with less answers and more opinions than anything. So it's a test. So I guess for those listening, we ask for your grace if you happen to not agree with us on something that's said, that's okay. It may be because what we said was wrong.
Right.
So, it's as much as anything, we hope that it's a conversation and an invitation to conversation. We'll offer some of our own thoughts and weaknesses in this. So you're probably wondering what the episode's about.
Well, I thought I was coming in for a nice, easy conversation today. I've had kind of a rough, busy week. But today we're going to talk about money. So if you guys want to join in, it'll be a fun topic and not exactly an easy one to cover, but we're going to go for it. And like Tommy said, we do not have all the answers, but this is going to be an exploration because money is one of those things you're not supposed to talk about, right?
Exactly.
And there's a reason. There's a reason for it because it's touchy. It can, it's a very private thing. You don't want anyone knowing how you think about money and then judging how you spend money or don't spend money or what you do with your money. It's very personal. So it feels a little bit vulnerable even talking about it in this context, but let's go for it.
It does.
I think one of the first things we're going to look at is, money is really paper, right? It is literally paper in a lot of ways, or it's like numbers on a bank statement. So it's not so much money per se, but it's when we are wanting more money, we're wanting more of what money can get us. I know that's an obvious statement, but it's helpful in the beginning to just think about what is it that you want that money can get you? Is it security? Is it fun, happiness, experiences? Is it like better opportunities for family members? And so it's just helpful to get the ball rolling, to get your mind thinking, what is it you want that money would give you?
Right. And I think what that betrays to me is that while a lot of people will say, look, it's just a piece of paper, it's just a tool, it's just a resource. The reality, no matter how true that is that we all have a relationship with it. It has a place in our lives. We relate to it. It impacts our feelings and our heart and our sense of security. So while it's just a tool on one end that we think, why is this such a big deal? It's such a big deal because it always tends to go deeper into us in various ways, like you say, security or comfort or this sense of, are we judged by how we're handling this? It has tentacles that reach into us and reach into our identity and our heart. And it almost feels strange acknowledging that, but I think it's really true.
Yeah, and it should be said that there is so much said in the Christian and Hebrew scriptures about money and how we relate to money and almost in relationship to how we relate to God, that I would just like to say that from the get-go, all of us in some way probably have some issue with money. And we tend to fall off the rails in different ways. But just to clear the deck, that's just a normal part of being human, that we tend to fall off the rails a little bit in our relationship with money. And to start off, what are some of the ways that we tend to kind of, as I say, have an unhealthy relationship or fall off the rails with money? What are some of the different iterations of that?
Yeah, and I think we could almost talk about it in the form of imbalance.
Okay.
In terms of as opposed to falling off the rails or whatever, because I think we all have a certain imbalance. So I think certain people will have an imbalance that leans towards an imbalance in frugality, that they're very, very careful and tight with it. And people who are frugal may love that about themselves, but there's a certain sense at which I am really careful. I'm very protective. I'm hyper responsible about money. And again, nothing wrong with that, but it can create potentially an imbalance on it. I think other people find money something that brings out their impulsive nature. They they kind of handle it fine, and then all of a sudden they go on a big spending spree, and things get out of control, and it brings out that impulsive nature. There are certainly people who are extremely generous with money. There are people who are maybe not necessarily don't go the imbalance route towards frugality, but they are extremely controlling about money. It is something that obsessively occupies their thoughts. It does for all of us to a certain degree, but there are these things that there's nothing wrong with them. They're all parts of the way we should interact with money, but we tend to be just a little imbalanced. All of us tend to be imbalanced. Mine is, I think, a certain sense of frugality with regards to money. So I have, I think, this almost schizophrenic type of thing with money, and that in the big sphere of things, I can be very generous because it feels like it's just a matter of writing a check and I can just kind of put it out of my mind and not think about it. But when it comes down to the real day to day, I can be very frugal, overly frugal about money. And I can tell I have to battle that because it gets out of whack. It gets overly ridiculous in terms of how I am about money in all sorts of contexts. So I have to watch that. I can tell that money has its claws in me by what it does and how it brings out that frugal piece in me.
Well, I love that you brought that up because I've talked about this with some friends before, that I think probably everybody has areas where we're extravagant about money and in an imbalanced way. And then we also simultaneously have ways where we're really tight and frugal and cheap. Like, I was joking with a friend of mine that I would have no problem spending sort of a ridiculous amount of money on a piece of art because that's something I'm into. But when I'm at Chipotle with my kids, I'm like, you are not getting the guacamole because they overcharge for the guacamole.
Oh,
or
it's
we are
$1.
not going to get separate Happy Meals. We're going to get a 20 nugget together because it's cheaper, and I will be like just really adamant about it. And it's hilarious when you think about it. And it brings up a point because when you are in relationship with other people, which most of us are, or when you're living in a family, you have competing values with areas where you're cheap and areas where you're extravagant. And so, someone else's extravagance might bump up against my areas of frugality. And then that's where we have some tension.
Absolutely. So, and that's often one of the first things that shows itself in a marriage. And they say finances are often the number one cause of marriages separating. And it's because we do come at it with this strong current of the way we look at money. And we are convinced to a large degree that our way of looking at it is better than other ways of looking at it. And that I call it a personality because it is almost like a money personality that comes out. We want to defend it. We want to rationalize it. We want to exalt it as better than other ways. And that gets that can get in the way, certainly in a family in a huge way, but can even get in the way of friendships.
Oh, sure. Well, I think it's hard in friendships. If you grew up, say you were in college together and you were really close friends, and then your lives take you in very different career paths and you have different amounts of money to spend, it's increasingly hard to stay connected because what you'll find is one wants to do things that the other can't afford. And then, like, how do you overcome that bridge? And I think money can divide people. I also think sometimes the more money you have, the easier it is to be kind of disconnected from each other. And I have a friend who you know him too, Paul Miller. He's an author, a friend of mine, and he talks about, like, it's even spatially, like the more money you have. When we first got married, we had one living area and it was tiny, and one TV and one couch. And we were all like tangled up, watching shows together, everything. And now we have multiple TVs, multiple couches. And so even just spatially, you can kind of get more disconnected the more money you have. And so just being aware of how money impacts our relationships, I think, is a really important thing.
Which I think is almost a takeaway that's worth the whole podcast in my mind is the encouragement for us all to name our money personality.
Yeah.
Even saying in this time that I'm a frugal person, it kind of makes me itch a little bit. It's uncomfortable because I like to think of myself as being really wise and very steady and balanced, and frugal kind of rubs me a little bit wrong. But if I'm honest, that is the way I am. And just admitting that on the front end is a move towards healthiness. And if we can name those types of things, it affords the opportunity for healthy conversations and healthy growth. And to me, that's by itself a really positive thing when it comes to this difficult subject.
Yeah, so I like how you say name your money personality, and just thinking about where the rub is with money is a great way to figure out what your relationship is with money. Like, where is there tension? Is it causing tension in your relationships? Is it causing tension in your own just sense of security and happiness? And naming that is great.
So I think along with naming our relationship to money, another very healthy place is to perhaps admit the degree to which our minds are consumed by thinking about money, or that we worry about money, whichever way we want to verbalize that. But I think we all think about money a lot, and we all worry about money to a certain degree. I think acknowledging that and acknowledging the degree to which that's problematic for each person, and that's going to vary. Some people may worry about it not a lot, and then some people would have to probably say, I think about it all the time, and I worry about it. I worry about whether we're going to have enough. I worry about whether this investment's going to go well, or any number of things that they might have to acknowledge that, if I'm really honest with myself, I worry about this a lot. That's a very healthy place to begin the conversation.
Yeah, and I'll push back on that a little bit. I think most people worry about money, but I also think all of us, to a certain extent, have a little bit of a level of denial about money. Like, we vacillate from worrying about it all the time to, I'm just not going to think about it, and I'm just going to put it on the credit card. Like,
Sure.
I'm going to deny it and not think about it. Or even the denial. I mean, I grew up in a family where both of my parents grew up with a decent amount of money, and they traveled in those circles, and they had these great educations, and they had these great vacations and all of that. And then they became adults, during the hippie era. So they went the other way and rebelled against it. And my father was an artist, he was a maker, and there was a certain level of denying that money was important. We're going to react against that. And I think that there is a balance in living in the reality of money is a factor. It's something that we have to consider, we have to work towards, but not let it have too much weight. And which is why I think it's great for this whole series about giving and receiving.
Yes.
It's about sort of figuring out which side you end to fall on, and then what are some of the minor or big steps that we can take to rebalance our life when it comes to money. Are we worrying about it too much? Are we in denial about it and just racking up credit card debt?
Right.
So I'm hoping that you can give us some steps about rebalancing.
Well, I think if nothing else, hopefully some conversation points.
Okay.
So I think one of the great things that has come to the surface in the entirety of this series that we've talked about receiving and giving, along with the concepts of receiving and giving, we'll come back to that, is the importance of identifying our mindset. That is, do we come at areas of our life with an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset? Mm-hmm. And money is an area that is perhaps the most prone, it's very close with time on this, that is the most prone to inviting us into a scarcity mindset, because we think that money is a very defined resource with a certain amount of it available, certainly a certain amount available in our bank accounts. And therefore, we might run out of it. If we don't do money right, we might find ourselves underwater. Mm-hmm. And then lots of bad things happen. So we come at money very naturally and understandably with a mindset that says it's a scarce resource. It is a limited resource, and therefore we better watch out about it. We better worry about it. And the abundance mindset is very, very counterintuitive when it comes to money. But I think it's the place that that Jesus addressed very, very clearly, and in a very challenging way in Matthew 6, when he said, you love money or you love God, one or the other. And then he goes into this long passage after this. He says, who by worrying can add a minute to their life? Who by worrying about it is going to clothe themselves any better than how God clothes the flowers in the field? Who by worrying about it will take care of their food when God feeds? So he, in essence, says your scarcity mindset is misplaced because God is bigger than the scarcity of money. That's a huge thing to say, that he was in essence saying to a very, very poor culture, you don't need to worry about this. God has this in his hands, and you can relax and trust God with money, with these resources. So I think Jesus was inviting us to an abundance mindset when it comes to money, which dramatically influences the way we think about giving. It dramatically influences what it means to be responsible, and it dramatically influences the joy or the possibility of joy around money. So I love that. I think counter to what even seems logical, Jesus is calling us to an abundance mindset when it comes to money, which means we're trusting God bigger than what we can logically see as a number in our bank account.
Yeah, and I like this idea of God and money, and you can't love God and money at the same time because they both tend to promise things that we long for. And I think we get into trouble when we start looking to money to provide things that it's not meant to provide. Because I think about it like we look to money to provide a sense of safety and security. We look to money even to provide access to friendships and to community. We look to money to make us look good in order to be received and have friendships and feel connected to others. We look to money to give our kids opportunities, all of these things. And when the Bible also talks about seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these things shall be added unto you, because there's this way that when we go after money and we ask it to give us things that it's not meant to give us, then that's when we get off balance, and that's when we start to worry about it. And those are kind of some of the signs that we're looking for it to do more than it should in our lives.
Yeah, and in some sense I'd even push back on that, because I think the reality is money does do things for us. I mean, it does buy us education for our kids, and it buys us clothes that we like to wear. It buys us a lot of really nice things. The problem with money is sometimes not that it promises us things that that it doesn't deliver, but that it gets out of whack, out of priority. So I love in that verse, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all the other things will be added to you. It's like nothing wrong with the other things, nothing wrong with the things that money can buy. It's just when that becomes outsized with us and we begin to trust money for things that we get out of whack. So I think it's a both and thing. Money is something to enjoy. So money does wonderful things for us, but it can't do everything for us. And so somehow we need to live in both worlds that, oh yeah, it's great. It's so great to be able to go out and have a really nice dinner with friends. We shouldn't feel guilty about that. We shouldn't feel like, that's a bad use of money and this is bad. We're supposed to enjoy money. God even wants us to enjoy money. It's just that it can't become too big.
Well, and I'll push back on you because I think money does. It buys us clothes, it buys us education, it buys us experiences. For sure. But it also tempts us to think that those things matter more than they do.
Yeah, exactly.
So if it buys great education, then we think we need this in order to have a well-lived life.
Yes.
We need to have this kind of clothes or this kind of house in order to have a well-lived, happy, fulfilling life. And I think that's where that phrase, I really love this phrase. It's the deceitfulness of wealth, the deceitfulness of wealth. Mm-hmm. And it comes from the Bible. And it's not that, like you said, money in and of itself is bad, but it's the love of money. It's that we believe that money is going to give us something fundamental that it can't give us. We believe some of these core things that all of humans long for are available through God, whether you have money or don't have money. And I think sometimes when you have a lot of money, you're tempted to believe that it comes through the things that you're buying. And if you don't have a lot of money and you look out at the world and you see all the riches on TV, you're tempted to think, oh, if only I had those things, then I would have a life well lived. And that's where we get into that love of money, whether you have it or you don't. You kind of believe the lie that it is the key to having a well-lived life.
Well, and it's very true. They've done some studies on happiness, which was kind of where this whole series started off. And to what degree does money buy happiness was the question that this series, it wasn't a Christian series. It was just, trying to address this. And the conclusion they came to was that up to a certain income level, money does buy happiness. That is, you have to be able to put food on the table and clothes and have a roof over your head. But once you got over a certain level, and it wasn't a particularly high level, I think at the time of this study it was 75,000. They said that actually there's an inverse relationship with more wealth and happiness, that more money did not buy people more happiness. And in fact, as people went up the scale, they found that their reported happiness was going down. Now, that wasn't necessarily, they weren't saying it's because I have a lot of money, but they were just saying the fact of the matter is, as people got wealthier, they reported being less happy. And so, that's very much along the lines of everything you've said. But somehow I think we have to realize, I think, how tricky this subject is. And that's where somehow in the midst of these conversations, that is very true about, this thing isn't going to make you happier. And that's very true. We somehow have to get money out of this place that just invokes such a sense of guilt in our life. Like, I'm thinking this and this isn't how it works. And that's not going to move us to a place of healthiness. And to some degree, I mean, we're in a wealthy culture. Probably most of the people listening to this are doing fine. And so somehow we have to get out of the guilt place. And, my vision for money at a healthier place is that I have a freedom with regards to it, a freedom to be able to enjoy it without realizing that it's more than it is, as you said.
Yeah.
This nuanced balance of how we approach it. And it's perhaps part of the conversation is, what are some practices that we can do that can perhaps move us more to that sense of freedom and balance with regards to it, and not this obsessive clutching or believing that it's going to do more for us than it will.
Well, I think all of us probably aspire to be more generous people, and generosity I think of as a hallmark of having a free, maybe even joyful relationship with money. Like if you are giving away money to an organization or to a group of people because you feel like you ought to, I don't think of that as bringing a lot of joy, but maybe that's a starting point, like maybe just starting to practice giving money away. But the people I know who really experience a lot of joy in relationship to money do have this learned ability and skill to be generous, not just with money, but with money linked to care and heart. And that dual giving of like something that you really love and care about with money, that combining of love and money in a way of generosity, I think is a hallmark of a great relationship with money, and also a hallmark of freedom and joy.
That's really good. I love kind of that phrase of the combining of love and money kind of as an expression of love. And that's often where I find that I struggle. I have less trouble writing a check for an organization than I do expressing love with money in the form of gifts or paying for a meal. That's when that frugality kind of can come into play with me. And yet that's one of the places I miss out so often in the joy of giving. And I think it is meant to bring joy. And so there's, again, even in generosity, there's these nuances. And I love the phrase, I think it's in Corinthians, it says, God loves a cheerful giver. And I thought, okay, now that's something to really aspire to. More than how much I give, or where I give is, can I become a cheerful giver? And that, man, that challenges me in a tremendous way. And yet that's probably more of a litmus test of my health towards money than any of these other things.
Yeah, because, some people who have been practicing in a religious faith tradition give 10% of their money away because that's what's prescribed to do. And they've been doing it all along. And so it's a part of their practice, almost like you have to pay taxes. So you also give money away. But there may not be a lot of passion and heart and joy in it. And then there's a lot of us who don't have that practice at all of giving any money away. And we're looking for a way to start to give money away and maybe work that into our finances. But I think in either case, I love what you said about God loves a cheerful giver, because a good place to start is thinking about and noticing where you feel love towards others, where you feel love in your city, in your community. Maybe it's, I've been hearing about the Ronald McDonald houses, the Ronald McDonald rooms, and how amazing they are for families who have children who are in the hospital. Or maybe it's for someone who is in recovery from an accident, and it's like a sheltering arms that provides rehabilitation. But just kind of paying attention to where your heart is moved, I think is a great first step for learning to have a healthier relationship with money and following up with maybe being generous in that area.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. And I think the core is to get to a place where we are joyful and cheerful givers. We still have to be aware, though, I think, of that deceitfulness of riches that you spoke about, because I think we can kid ourselves by being joyful about giving small amounts, but we are still hyper controlling about making sure that we have enough. And I think giving in a trusting way, like those who perhaps give large sums of money, is a great way of also testing our heart to say, where are we? And again, I don't think it's about obligations or rules about it. I think it's about the freedom and who do we really trust? Do we trust in our bank account or do we trust in God? At some point, that is a question. It's a hard question for all of us.
It is a hard question. And I don't really have any answers about how to press into that.
Yeah.
All I know is that, like, trusting in your bank account is not really a very good, safe bet, especially these days, because it changes so much. Like, you can have investments in one thing and it falls apart, or you can even have investments in your house. I mean, it's just not a sure thing.
But I do trust in my bank account. So again, I'm not one that's arrived. I'm one that's deeply struggles with this. And I have to acknowledge the fact, just by the way I live, is that I trust in my bank account.
Yeah.
Maybe even first, but I don't want to live that way.
I mean, I think we all are that way.
Yeah.
We really are.
So all I want to do is I just want to press against that.
Yeah.
I just want to become freer with regards to money. I want to be more trusting of God, maybe even at times in an uncomfortable way. And that's the encouragement to me in this conversation, is to say, yeah, we all have issues with this, but maybe we can and should begin to push against that and to perhaps find and believe that God has a better way with regards to money, one that's filled with more joy and more possibility and even maybe more abundance if we were to trust him. So I know I don't, and I know I want to and am trying to push against that, both in the small ways of bringing love and in the substantive ways of the sums that I give. It's got to happen, for me at least, in both ways.
So what you're talking about is not just thinking about where do I feel love in an outward way that I could follow up with money, like that I could give some money, but doing it in a significant enough way that it's a risk. It pushes you. And it involves trusting. It's almost like an active step to say, I am going to trust my life and my security in God instead of my bank account. And put your money where your mouth is, as they say.
Yeah. And a good example, and I don't mean to pat us on the back at all with regards to this, but we have practiced giving because we believed it was something that was right in our relationship with God and right to right-size money. Early on, many of those kind of checks per se, there wasn't necessarily any joy going along with it because we didn't know how it would be used. We were just putting it aside out of our bank account into someone else's for something. And the whole story that was the second in this episode of the real life happy story was how that came around with this tremendous joy for this money that didn't give us per se any joy when we initially took it away, but that we could build something and do something significant in terms of the schools in Niger that would have never been possible if it was just about us receiving joy every time we wrote a check. We were writing those checks, in a sense, out of obedience, out of a sense that saying God is bigger and we're going to trust him. It wasn't until years, even decades later, that we saw that come back to us in this monumental joy of what we could do with that money set aside. We never could have imagined that.
That's a great practical point because not everyone has something that they're really passionate about to give to. But establishing a discipline where every month you put money set aside for giving, whether it's a trust or some kind of situation where you have the discipline of giving, even if there isn't the love and the passion. And then later you, in a sense, reaped what you sowed.
And it's not even about the size of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it might just be that first check of $50 just feels really uncomfortable, but you write that first check anyway.
Yeah,
so it's something it actually begins to change our heart. The very practice begins to change our relationship with money, which is what all of this is about. And we have to do practical things to get us there. So again, not saying that I've arrived, but we're wanting to open up conversations, but also to encourage people to practical applications of doing something perhaps different with money that might change our relationship into a healthier balance. And that would just be a phenomenal thing, I think, for virtually every one of us, including people who don't claim faith. We all need to have a healthier relationship with money. Virtually everybody that is listening to this has been blessed in tremendous ways financially, even if you're very, very tight. So we all need to move in this direction. That's the encouragement to me as much as anything in this imperfect conversation.
Well, I love that step about setting money aside, maybe for something down the road. But another step that just came to mind while we're talking about it, and it goes back to that idea of how money can bring out conflict in our relationship. And I'm wondering if we could reframe the way we view our spouses, if you're married, as whatever rub it brings up in your relationship may be a little bit of a check to you about a way that you maybe are imbalanced. Like if one is more frugal and one's more of a spender. If money is something that you're always using to get your way, like I'm going to spend even if my partner doesn't want me to, or if you're the frugal one, you're saying, no, you can't spend this money. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for self-sacrifice even there in putting our relationships before money. And not in a huge way, but in a little way, say you don't want your spouse to get something. Maybe you care about them and value their it's an opportunity to look at their values, not just your own. Or maybe you are a big spender and you choose without being told to not do something out of love for your spouse. And it's just like this little step that maybe you can come to bring in the middle. And it also, your attitude towards money and your spouse's attitude towards you, if we reframe it, is maybe an opportunity for growth.
Well, it's certainly an opportunity to show love.
Yeah.
By simply saying, this is what I want. This is even what I think is better, but I'm going to choose to care for you in this and give grace to you, or perhaps go along with what's important to you, even though it's not important to me.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of opportunities for us to show love with regards to money in our relationship with our spouse. So I think it's a great, just very practical application of it to say, you know what, I'm broken, you're broken, let's figure this out together.
And we're all extravagant and frugal in our own areas.
Absolutely.
And they probably don't match up with our spouse's areas.
Exactly.
So recognizing that and giving them a little bit of freedom in their area. So we've got some of the takeaways where money can reveal some of the tensions in our relationships. We tend to be off balance with money, and it's great to look and see and assess kind of what our relationship with money is. We talked a lot about generosity and joy as a way to bring money into a more healthy place. Any other thoughts?
Well, I would encourage those that claim faith as an important part of their lives to also realize that money is always going to be this challenge that allows us to look at the degree and the ways that we trust God and we do not trust God. It's an opportunity to trust God more deeply with very practical pieces of our life, to trust God with our money, to trust God with our desires for the things that we want, that we know money can buy, to trust God with our future, related to whether we're going to have enough money or what we're going to do. It's such an opportunity to engage with God in the real stuff of life. So again, these are all conversations with God, conversations with our spouse, conversations with ourselves that I think are powerful. So that would be my real encouragement, is to enter into the conversations with God about trust, enter into the conversations with your spouse, with your friends, enter into the reflections with yourself about your relationship with money. That would be such a powerful step to growth, one that every single one of us, you, me included, deeply need to do.
I like how you reframe that as money. Not thinking about money isn't something we have to do, but it's an opportunity to bring to God some ways that we maybe could trust him more. And I also just think it's an opportunity to not live in denial. Money in a sense represents reality, and to not live in denial that money doesn't matter. It does matter, but it's not the most important thing.
Right.
And that verse that you brought up, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. And you cannot love God and money. We can't look to money to be our end all be all and be trusting God at the same time. You have to trust in one area and know that God will provide the money when we trust in him, and God will provide us what we need. It's Luke 6, right? Or Matthew 6. Matthew 6. I love that. If anybody listening wants to think more about this, that whole chapter speaks really directly to this topic.
Yep. Great. We appreciate your patience and your grace in listening to this conversation. Our hope is that it will help you in your thoughts and perspectives, even to whatever degree you don't agree with the things that we've said, that it will evoke positive things that will help us all grow to be better, happier people.
Yeah, I'm going to go get some guacamole at Chipotle.
That's right. That's
Be less frugal.
That's great. Thanks so much.